The fuel tanks looked completely wrong. Sitting beneath the wings of the P-51 Mustang like oversized lunch bags, they seemed too flimsy for warfare, too simple for something that would change everything. Lieutenant William Overstreet stared at them through his quarters window that March evening in 1944. Ground crews worked under harsh floodlights. They handled these strange cylindrical objects with surprising care. The tanks appeared fragile, made from what looked like heavy brown paper, wrapped and sealed like packages waiting for delivery. Other pilots had started calling them paper bags. The nickname wasn't entirely wrong. These fuel containers were actually constructed from laminated craft paper, layers of compressed newsprint, soaked in plastic resin, manufactured in converted newspaper plants across Britain. Workers who normally produced the London Times now built weapons of war, using the same materials, the same techniques, different purpose entirely. Tomorrow would test everything. The longest fighter escort mission ever attempted, all the way to Berlin and back. A round trip that military experts had declared impossible. Too far. Too dangerous. Beyond the capabilities of single-seat fighters, the mathematics seemed impossible. Berlin sat 580 miles from their East Anglia airfields, over 1,100 miles round trip. No fighter had ever attempted such distance. No escort had ever reached the Nazi capital, but these paper tanks might change that calculation forever. The crisis had been building for months. October 14, 1943, marked the breaking point. Black Thursday. Colonel Hubert Zemke watched the mission reports arrive like death sentences. 60 B-17s lost in a single day. 600 men gone. Vanished over Germany. The Schweinfurt mission had been a disaster. Of 291 flying fortresses that took off that morning, 60 never returned. Another 17 came back so damaged they had to be scrapped. Over 1/4 of the attacking force, destroyed or written off. The daylight bombing campaign was bleeding to death. Dying bomber by bomber over hostile territory. Without fighter protection, the big formations were helpless. Sitting ducks for German interceptors. Technical Sergeant Robert Morgan survived that hell. Ball turret gunner on a 100th Bomb Group fortress. His testimony to intelligence officers painted the picture clearly. The Germans waited, patient as hunters, until the escort fighters turned back. The P-47 Thunderbolts could only reach 375 miles with standard drop tanks. Beyond that invisible line, they were on their own, alone over enemy territory, waiting for the attacks to begin. Wave after wave of German fighters, head-on attacks against the bomber formations, twin-engine aircraft firing rockets from beyond gun range, methodical destruction that lasted for hours. No escape, no help coming. The solution was taking shape in a modest office at Bovingdon. Colonel Cass Howe examined what looked more like arts and crafts than military equipment. Fuel tanks constructed from laminated paper, impregnated with resin, made by Bowater Lloyd of London, the same company that produced newsprint for Fleet Street, now manufacturing weapons instead of newspapers, using identical materials and techniques, paper, glue, industrial processes, all repurposed for warfare. Howe had spent months developing this unlikely answer, working alongside British engineers who faced different problems: metal shortages, aluminum rationing, every pound of strategic material precious. They needed alternatives, non-metallic solutions, but Howe saw different advantages entirely. Weight savings that translated directly into range. These paper tanks weighed 50 pounds empty. Metal versions weighed 150 pounds. That 100-pound difference meant more fuel, greater distance, extended combat radius. The construction was surprisingly sophisticated. multiple layers of craft paper, bonded with resin and formaldehyde glue, shaped over wooden forms, internal baffles to prevent fuel sloshing, coated with protective lacquer, painted with aluminum paint for distinctive appearance. First combat tests came in February 1944. P-47s of the 56th Fighter Group flew with British-made 108-gallon paper tanks. Major James Goodson led the mission. His combat report documented perfect performance. No leaks, no failures. Range extended by 125 miles to Hanover and back. But this was just the beginning. The real breakthrough waited for the right aircraft. The P-51 Mustang arrived at Debden in late February. Colonel Donald Blakesley's 4th Fighter Group received their first Mustangs on February 28th. Less than 24 hours to transition from Thunderbolts. Captain Don Gentile had exactly 45 minutes of flight time in the Mustang before his first combat mission. No time for extensive training. No gradual introduction. Just climb in and fly. Learn by doing. Adapt or die. The marriage of Mustang and paper tanks would rewrite aerial warfare. The P-51 could carry two 108-gallon paper tanks, manufactured in increasing numbers at Bowater Lloyd plants. With these tanks, combat radius extended to 850 miles. Berlin was suddenly within reach. March 4, 1944. The morning briefing at Debden crackled with electric tension. Intelligence Officer Major John McCulpin pulled back the curtain. The mission map showed a red ribbon stretching from their base all the way to Berlin. First time in history. Single-engine fighters escorting bombers to the enemy capital. 1,100-mile round trip. Historic milestone. Game-changing mission that would alter the entire strategic bombing campaign. Captain William O'Brien remembered that moment decades later. You could hear a pin drop. Then someone whistled low. Berlin. They were actually going to Berlin in fighters. The impossible was becoming possible. Crew chiefs had been filling paper tanks since 3 a.m. Careful work. The tanks would only hold fuel for about 5 hours. After that, gasoline started breaking down the resin. Chemical degradation. Inevitable failure. But 5 hours was enough. Just enough to reach Berlin and get home. Perfect timing for perfect range. Engineering matched to mission requirements. The paper tank engineering was deceptively complex. 3 main components: nose cone, tail cone, body section. Center section consisted of impregnated paper layers wrapped around cylinders. End caps were hand-laminated with pedal-shaped pieces called gores. Each tank held 108 U.S. gallons of 100-octane aviation fuel, sometimes listed as 110 gallons total capacity. Actual usable fuel was 108 gallons. The tanks measured 100 inches long. Pressure tested to 6 psi. Remarkable tolerance for extreme conditions. Sea level to 40,000 feet. Temperatures from -60 to +120 degrees Fahrenheit. Perfect function across the entire operational envelope. All from compressed paper and plastic resin. Workers at Bowater Lloyd adapted quickly. Many were women, previously employed in newspaper production, now building weapons of war. Same skills, same materials, different purpose. Production increased steadily through 1944. American technical experts remained skeptical. Wright Field declared paper tanks absolutely unfeasible. Will not do the job intended. Laboratory assessments contradicted field experience. By the time this verdict reached England, the 8th Air Force had used over 15,000 paper tanks, without a single failure attributable to construction. Colonel Howe's response was characteristically direct. Combat results spoke louder than laboratory theories. Success in battle trumped expert opinions. The tanks worked. That was all that mattered. March 4th saw over 700 heavy bombers heading for Berlin. P-51 Mustangs and P-47 Thunderbolts providing escort. Colonel Blakesley's pre-mission briefing was recorded by Intelligence Officer Captain John Slater. These paper tanks will get you there and back. At the initial point, punch them off. Engage any enemy fighters. With these tanks, we own the sky all the way to Berlin. The mission wasn't without cost. 4th Fighter Group lost Lieutenant Alan Bunty, shot down by flak near Brandenburg, but the psychological impact on both sides was profound, revolutionary, world-changing. Luftwaffe pilot Oberleutnant Heinz Knöcke recorded his shock in his diary. American fighters over Berlin. Their intelligence had insisted this was impossible. Everything they'd been told was wrong. The strategic situation had shifted overnight. For bomber crews, seeing Mustangs over Berlin was transformative. Ball turret gunner Sergeant Dale Rice of the 100th Bomb Group watched P-51s at 30,000 feet, contrails streaming behind them. One waggled its wings as it passed. He could see the drop tanks clearly. Paper tanks that made the impossible possible. March 6th brought immediate results. Bombers returned to Berlin with Mustang escort. Luftwaffe interceptions decreased significantly. Major Walter Nowotny, one of Germany's top aces with 258 victories, reported to High Command. The Americans had solved the range problem. Their tactical advantage was gone. Production exemplified Allied industrial cooperation. Bowater Lloyd had produced 60% of British newsprint before the war. Now they converted facilities at Sittingbourne and Kemsley to tank production. Experience with paper lamination made them ideal. Access to raw materials sealed the deal. Kraft paper came from recycled newspapers and packaging. Resin and formaldehyde glue from Imperial Chemical Industries. Materials that didn't compete with other war priorities. Entire production process took 72 hours from raw materials to finished tank. Additional production came from distributed manufacturing. Workers in home workshops contributed to the war effort. Tanks were wrapped in heavy brown paper for shipping. Transport efficiency was remarkable. Far more paper tanks fit in aircraft than metal versions. Master Sergeant Donald Wagner handled drop tank logistics at Leiston. His team started work at 2 a.m. on mission days, unwrapping tanks, checking seals, mounting on aircraft pylons. The system was elegantly simple. Tanks attached to standard bomb shackles. Quick-release mechanism operated from the cockpit. Pull a lever. Both tanks jettisoned simultaneously. Essential for combat maneuvering. Fuel feed used existing aircraft plumbing. Check valves prevented loss when tanks released. Critical limitation was chemical breakdown. Resin slowly dissolved from fuel solvent effects. Leaks developed within hours. Single-use items that required immediate pre-flight filling. By May 1944, the impact was measurable. Before effective long-range escort, 8th Air Force suffered catastrophic losses. October 1943 saw monthly rates of 7.6%. Individual missions like Black Thursday reached 20.6%. Unsustainable. Deadly. Campaign-ending losses. P-51s with drop tanks changed everything. Regular escort missions brought overall loss rates down to 1.5 to 2.2%. Dramatic reduction. Thousands of aircrew lives saved. Strategic bombing campaign became sustainable, effective, war-winning. Republic aviation engineers discovered unexpected advantages. Paper tanks had better aerodynamics than metal versions, created less drag, improved aircraft performance, less likely to explode when hit by enemy fire. Paper and resin tore rather than fragmented. Safer for aircraft and crew. Environmental benefits weren't considered then, but proved significant. partially biodegradable construction. Breakdown within months in fields and forests. Unlike metal tanks that became permanent hazards to farming and livestock. Better for everyone except the enemy. Lieutenant Colonel John Meyer flew the March 6th mission to Berlin. Combat report preserved in National Archives provides detailed pilot perspective. Takeoff at 10:45 with two 108-gallon paper tanks. Perfect fuel transfer throughout flight. Released tanks at 13:47 near Wittenberg when bounced by FW-190s. Weight difference after dropping tanks was dramatic. Aircraft performance improved immediately. Climb rate increased. Maneuverability enhanced. He shot down one FW-190, damaged another, returned home with 45 gallons remaining. Without paper tanks, they would have turned back at Brunswick. Mission impossible without them. Strategic impact extended beyond bomber protection. Extended range allowed fighter sweeps deep into Germany, attacking airfields, rail yards, targets of opportunity. Colonel Hubert Zemke's tactical analysis concluded paper tanks had fundamentally altered the air war. Americans seized the initiative completely. German response was documented in captured records. Messerschmitt Technical Intelligence Report from May 15, 1944. Enemy using disposable fuel tanks of revolutionary construction. Laminated paper with phenolic resin impregnation. They attempted duplication, but failed. Lacked industrial infrastructure for mass production. German failure wasn't technical ignorance. Systemic problems in war economy. Paper mills converted to military maps and documentation. Resin materials prioritized for aircraft construction. Most critically, they lacked distributed manufacturing model. Allied production was resilient. German production was brittle. Luftwaffe leadership understood immediately. Post-war interrogations revealed strategic implications. Hermann Göring's alleged quote about Mustangs over Berlin can't be verified, but documented testimony shows he acknowledged long-range fighters delivered major strategic blows. When fighters appeared over Berlin, results would be tragic for Germany. General der Jagdflieger Adolf Galland testified that American fighters ranging over Germany with impunity broke Luftwaffe defensive strategy. No safe areas remained, no sanctuary for rebuilding, no respite from attack, constant pressure from all directions. By June 1944, paper drop tanks were standard equipment. Sergeant James Patterson at Duxford maintained logistics records. Paper tanks required 1/10 the shipping space of metal versions. Single C-47 transport carried hundreds of flattened paper tanks, compared to 40 metal tanks. Efficiency multiplied throughout the system. Forward airfields in France could be supplied by air after D-Day. Operational tempo maintained even when ground supply lines stretched. Flexibility built into the logistics system. Adaptation to changing circumstances. Environmental impact documented by French farmers post-war. Metal tanks killed cattle. Damaged plows. Required extensive cleanup lasting years. Paper tanks dissolved in winter rain. Left only metal fittings for scrap sale. Much better outcome for everyone. Captain Donald Bryan experienced rare tank failure July 18, 1944. Only documented case in his squadron. Port tank developed leak at 25,000 feet over Hanover. Lost half the fuel before switching off. Still made it home with fuel to spare from starboard tank. Redundancy built into the system worked perfectly. Technical improvements continued throughout 1944. Second-generation paper tanks featured improved resin formulations. Extended fuel storage time from 5 to 12 hours. Pre-mission preparation possible night before. Reduced ground crew workload during critical pre-dawn hours. Better cold weather treatment prevented fuel line freezing at altitude. D-Day invasion showcased complete transformation. Fighter bombers with paper tanks ranged far inland, disrupting German reinforcements hundreds of miles from beaches. Captain Robert Johnson flew 3 missions on D-Day, each time with paper drop tanks. Extended loiter time over battlefield. Continuous fighter cover proved crucial to Operation Overlord's success. Production statistics from mid-1944 show massive scale. British factories produced thousands monthly. Bowater Lloyd primary manufacturer. Other facilities supplemented production. Entire Allied fighter force could be equipped with fresh tanks every mission. Metal tank production remained limited by aluminum availability. Critical resources needed for aircraft production. Colonel Francis Gabreski, leading European ace with 28 victories, flew most successful mission July 5, 1944. Paper drop tanks to Magdeburg. Shot down 3 Messerschmitt Bf-109s after dropping tanks near Brandenburg. After-action report noted perfect performance at 30,000 feet. Minus 40-degree temperatures. Clean release when bounced by enemy fighters. Critical climb rate improvement after release. September 1944 marked effective end of Luftwaffe Day Fighter Force. General Galland reported to Hitler. American fighters ranging over Germany with impunity. Long-range escort protected bombers and engaged in systematic Luftwaffe destruction. Aggressive fighter sweeps hunted German pilots to extinction. German pilot training collapsed. Scattered fields to avoid attack. Pilots produced with fewer than 50 hours flight time. American pilots had 400 hours. Experience gap became unbridgeable. Quality degraded to dangerous levels. First Lieutenant Urban Drew achieved remarkable feat, October 7, 1944. 361st Fighter Group escort to Politz near Polish border. 1,400-mile round trip with 108-gallon paper tanks. After dropping tanks, shot down 2 Messerschmitt Me-262 jets. Among first pilots to down revolutionary German fighters. Paper tanks enabled historic achievement. Battle of the Bulge tested logistics systems. December 1944 saw forward airfields hastily constructed. Supply lines strained. Lightweight paper tanks delivered by light aircraft. Even parachute drop. Captain Jack Ilfrey's 20th Fighter Group documented surge operations. 3 missions December 23rd. Fresh paper tanks each time. Ground crews rearm and refuel, including new tanks in 20 minutes. German technical intelligence, Major Wilhelm Hoffmann captured April 1945. Post-war testimony about Allied drop tank impact. They tracked every innovation in Allied fighter capability. Paper drop tanks more strategically significant than any new aircraft type. Nowhere in Reich safe from fighter attack. Entire air defense strategy based on concentric fighter base rings became obsolete overnight. Strategic bombing survey numbers were conclusive. 1943, before widespread long-range escort, saw German fighter production increase despite bombing. Late 1944, with Mustangs over every factory, saw 40% production drop. More critically, fuel production fell 90%, grounded even fighters that were built. Lieutenant Colonel John Landers, 78th Fighter Group commanding officer, flew 103 combat missions, many with paper drop tanks. His assessment to Air Force historians in 1962 emphasized paper tanks as unsung heroes. Simple, cheap, absolutely essential. Without British paper tanks, Berlin escort impossible. Without that capability, Luftwaffe couldn't be broken. Production techniques influenced post-war manufacturing. Lamination processes adapted for civilian aircraft components. Eventually, aerospace applications. Quality control procedures at Bowater Lloyd became British manufacturing standards. Workers trained in precision paper construction founded companies. aircraft interior panels to architectural components. Major Richard Turner, 356th Fighter Group, called paper tanks passports to Berlin in his 1946 memoir. Looked ridiculous, but worked perfectly. Flew 89 missions with paper tanks without single failure. Simple engineering that transcended specific requirements. Soviet observers attached to 8th Air Force units reported to Moscow. Colonel Ivan Kozhedub, Soviet top ace, tested, captured German tanks. Compared to American paper tanks in 1945, American tanks superior in every measure. Brilliant simplicity, not advanced technology. Production surge for final offensive demonstrated Allied industrial might. Every fighter mission over Germany employed fresh tanks. Ground crews at forward bases in Belgium and Holland equipped entire fighter groups in hours rather than days. System flexibility reached maximum efficiency. Lieutenant Robert Powell, 55th Fighter Group, experienced ultimate reliability test March 24, 1945. Operation Varsity Rhine Crossing. Takeoff 0600 with two 18-gallon paper tanks. Flew to Rhine. Dropped tanks when engaged by Me-262s near Frankfurt. Fought 15 minutes. Landed forward strip. Took new tanks. Flew another mission. System flexibility and reliability demonstrated perfectly. Last major paper tank employment came April 25, 1945. Mustangs escorted reconnaissance aircraft to Hitler's Berchtesgaden retreat. 1,400-mile round trip. Mission demonstrated total Allied air dominance. Fighters ranging over furthest Reich corners unopposed. Complete victory in the air war. Colonel Benjamin Davis, Jr., 332nd Fighter Group Tuskegee Airmen, employed paper tanks on escort missions from Italy into southern Germany. March 31, 1945, after-action report stated 108-gallon tanks allowed Munich escort and enemy fighter engagement throughout mission. Perfect performance exceeding 30,000 feet. Simple paper tanks gave them range to prove worth as fighter pilots. Psychological impact on German civilians documented in captured letters and diaries. American fighters overhead constantly. Dropping fuel tanks made of paper in parks and streets. Such wealth they could carry fuel in paper containers and throw them away. Demonstration of industrial superiority that demoralized entire populations. Post-war Pentagon analysis revealed strategic importance. Aluminum savings alone justified entire program. Reduced shipping costs, simplified logistics, decreased ground crew requirements, benefits multiplied throughout system. Most importantly, extended fighter range saved estimated 8,000 bomber crew lives. Reduced loss rates from catastrophic 1943 levels to sustainable 1944 rates. Air Chief Marshal Arthur Harris, RAF Bomber Command, initially skeptical of daylight bombing, acknowledged in memoirs that American achievement extending fighter range through disposable tanks validated entire strategic concept. Daylight precision bombing became possible only with long-range escort. General James Doolittle, 8th Air Force Commander, provided strategic assessment in final report. Extension of fighter range through auxiliary fuel tanks, particularly British-manufactured paper tanks, was single most important tactical development of European air war. Transformed P-51 from good fighter into war-winning weapon system. Ability to escort bombers to any German target broke Luftwaffe back. Established Allied air supremacy essential for victory. Complete strategic transformation from simple technological innovation. Paper and resin changing the course of history. Human dimension extended to thousands of manufacturing workers. Sittingbourne facility employed 70% women workers. 3 shifts to meet demand. Every tank they built meant Allied aircrew could fly further and return safer. Personal connection to victory through daily production work. Technical specifications achieved were remarkable for seemingly simple devices. Each 108-gallon tank withstood 3 Gs acceleration when full, 9 Gs when empty. Perfect function across extreme temperature and altitude ranges. Fuel transfer rate matched internal systems. Seamless combat transition. All from compressed paper and plastic resin. Materials available in any industrialized nation. German aircraft designer Willy Messerschmitt admitted post-war they knew about auxiliary tanks. Used them operationally. Never imagined mass production of disposable tanks from non-strategic materials. Americans and British turned logistics problem into production advantage. Innovation through resource constraints. Military doctrine influence was profound and lasting. U.S. Air Force incorporated long-range fighter escort as fundamental principle. Aircraft design through Cold War and beyond. Disposable components to extend capability became standard. Fuel tanks to sensor pods to weapon pylons. Paper tank proved innovation didn't require exotic materials or revolutionary technology. Creative application of existing resources. Lieutenant General William Kepner, 8th Fighter Command, summarized impact in 1946 congressional testimony. Paper drop tank gave air superiority over Europe. Without it, bombers would have suffered prohibitive losses. Without it, fighters couldn't hunt Luftwaffe to extinction. Without it, D-Day might have failed. Complete dependence on simple innovation. Environmental legacy was significant, though unappreciated then. Approximately 15,000 paper tanks dropped over Europe, biodegraded within months. French agricultural reports from 1946 showed no lasting soil contamination. Areas with metal tanks required extensive cleanup into 1950s. Better solution for everyone except enemies. Quality control innovations influenced worldwide manufacturing. Complete reliability requirement in disposable product drove statistical process control development. Adopted across industries. Simple good-enough solutions could outperform over-engineered alternatives. Reduced costs while maintaining reliability. Revolutionary manufacturing philosophy. Strategic implications extended beyond World War II. Berlin Airlift, 1948, used transport aircraft with disposable tanks based on wartime paper technology. Korean War saw improved versions employed by F-51 Mustangs flying from Japan. Technology evolved into modern composites. Fundamental concept unchanged. Lightweight disposable range extension. Last combat use came May 7, 1945, one day before VE Day. Mustangs of 357th Fighter Group flew final patrol over Czechoslovakia. Lieutenant Robert Foy, 89th Mission, carried 2 108-gallon paper tanks to Prague and back. Dropped them over Farmers Field near Pilsen. War ending with paper tanks still working perfectly. Veterans' reunions throughout decades included crew chiefs and pilots sharing paper tank stories. 1995 50th anniversary gathering at Duxford saw former Luftwaffe General Adolf Galland meet American fighter pilots. Asked about air war turning point, Galland pointed to displayed paper tank. Simple thing that meant they could never be safe, never rest, never rebuild. Brought air war to their doorsteps daily until nothing left to fly. Technological simplicity masked sophisticated understanding. Materials, science, aerodynamics, production engineering. Each tank represented thousands of decisions. Materials, construction, testing, quality control. Success came from getting all decisions right, executing at unprecedented scale, engineering matched to mission requirements. Captain Luis Kurd, 3rd Air Commando Group, flew Mustangs in European and Pacific theaters. Compared impact across combat zones. Same simple solution worked in Pacific humidity and European cold. Good engineering transcending specific requirements. Universal application of basic principles. Legacy lived on unexpectedly. Phenolic resin technology developed for tank construction became basis for early circuit boards. Electronics revolution built on wartime innovation. Lamination presses designed for tanks repurposed for television cabinet manufacturing in 1950s. Workers trained in precision paper construction founded companies producing aircraft interior panels to architectural components. Skills transferring across industries. Wing Commander Peter Brothers, RAF fighter leader, observed American operations with paper tanks. Reported Americans approached war like business problem, buying range by gallon in disposable containers. No romance or elegance. Brutal efficiency. British gave technology. Americans gave mass production. Together, gave bombers safe passage to Berlin. Final accounting in Strategic Bombing Survey Summary Report documented 108-gallon laminated paper tanks, extended fighter escort range from 475 to 850 miles. 79% increase brought every German target within escort capability. Resulting bomber loss reduction saved approximately 8,000 aircrew lives. Enabled strategic bombing campaign to achieve objectives. Complete victory through simple innovation. Victory often depends not on revolutionary technology, but innovative application of simple solutions at massive scale. British Paper Company. American fighter planes. Compressed paper soaked in plastic resin. Combined to break Luftwaffe and secure Allied air supremacy. Total wartime production approximately 15,000 paper tanks, dismissed as unfeasible by experts, proved decisive in achieving air superiority over Germany. Each functioning tank represented life saved. Mission completed. Step closer to victory. Bombers could finally reach targets with protection. Fighters could finally fight where enemy lived. War in air won not by superior aircraft alone, but by superior range. Provided by disposable paper tanks looking like oversized cardboard tubes, carrying within them fuel for victory. Innovation arose from necessity when metal was scarce and bombers were dying. British ingenuity met American industrial capacity, creating solutions so simple it seemed impossible. Paper and resin. Newspaper companies and fighter planes, converging to solve one of war's most critical challenges. When Lieutenant William Overstreet flew over Berlin March 4, 1944, with paper tanks under wings, he carried culmination of months of development, testing and production by thousands of workers who would never see combat. Their contribution proved as vital as any military victory. Democracy's industrial might channeled through simple materials into war-winning capability. Paper drop tank story stands as testament to practical innovation over complex engineering. Sometimes best solution is not most advanced, but most achievable at scale when it matters most. Simple materials, creative application, mass production, combined with determination to achieve impossible through possible means. Victory through engineering simplicity and manufacturing excellence.